Okay, good morning.
Morning.
Appreciate your having me here today. Our company name is Immersion Media. I'm Rick Perko, and I'm here with Don Scott, who's our sales and marketing director. And I'm going to tell sort of an overview story about our company today. We've got a few specific things that we're working on in our lab, if you will, but this is going to be a little bit more broadly focused. I'm going to use stick figures today, and I'll tell you why at the end. This is me, the slender guy. This is my wife. Her hips aren't quite this wide. I have 2 daughters and a golden retriever. The reason this is up here is because we moved here about 12 years ago. This is our family. We're committed to Fayetteville. That's who we are. Let me tell you about our start. So I was about a little over a dozen years ago. I was working for a company called Sport Vision, and I was put in charge of the division to try to use 3D interactive animation to teach and to train. In our particular case, it was sports skills. And so I had worked really, really hard to bring in Major League Baseball as a client, and I finally succeeded. That's why I kicked my heels up like this. And so the next day, I called our president, who was in New York City, and I said, guess what? We finally got this thing done. And he said, I'm not sure we want to do this anymore. That was me. But if there was a little bubble with words, they would be...
A faint squeaky.
They would be. So I had worked really, really hard to bring in this big piece of business, and all of a sudden he said, we're not going to do it. So now I'm faced with, what am I going to do? I've got egg on my face. So what I did is I thought about it for a day, called our president back, and I said, since we're not going to do it, and since you're about to lay off the people who were going to do the execution, can I do it, and can I hire them? And he said yes. And that's the reason for my somewhat happy, somewhat sad oh. That he said yes, so now we get to do it, and there's a reaction kind of like this, and then it's kind of like that. Now we actually have to do it. So I had to go hire them, I had to call Major League Baseball, and I can say, yes, we're going to do the project, but guess what? It's not going to be with Sport Vision, it's going to be with a new company. Are you good with that? There's a really, really long pause. And he said yes. And that was the genesis of how we got started. I really felt like if I didn't try to do that then, the opportunity may not come along, because you can actually start a business with a client on day one. A client that's got a lot of notoriety and has a checkbook. And so that was how we got started. And the premise was all this 3D interactive learning and all these sports, and we were going to take off like gangbusters. We had a little bit of angel funding, and here we go, and we had baseball. We had a little bit of football coming in, a little bit of basketball. And so we had traction, but we didn't get everything we wanted. There were some people who said, just because they said yes doesn't mean we're going to, or we have another program, or we don't think what you're doing makes sense. So this grand idea that we had, which we were getting traction for, and it was working in some cases, didn't provide the sort of big explosion that we thought it would. So we had to say, okay, we can still have a very, very good start. We didn't get all the traction we wanted, so we got to keep going, we got to keep innovating, we got to find ways to keep this thing pushing ahead. And that kind of gets to why we're unique. We originally started off with this competitive market advantage of using technology for a purpose that no one else is using it for, or few were using it for, to use 3D animation to teach and to train, in this case sports, but in a much broader context as well. So what we realized is it all comes back really to the blocking and tackling. It comes back to the basics. So we're really big on relationships. Internally, the accountability and responsibility we try to have to each other, the way we try to treat our clients and partners, and when we can combine that with some ingenuity, it's super difficult today to be ingenious, if you will, because there are a lot of really big companies all around the world that are doing some really, really cool things. That makes our challenge harder, but we still spend a lot of time on it. And to the extent we're unique, these might be the things that, when combined, make us so. Where we've been and where we're going. We have been, as you've heard me talk about, a lot of, to use sort of the old-fashioned term, business to business. A lot of clients, a lot of corporations, a lot of leagues, organizations, national governing bodies, whatever you will, a lot in sports. And our direct-to-consumer was lagging behind. So again, this little character here is not saying that's a bad thing, it's just saying, oh, we have to realize that's where we've been. And so where we want to go is to be more in control of our own destiny. And that is to say, we don't want to diminish the cash flow, the notoriety that comes along with doing some great projects for some really neat clients. We want to continue to fuel that. But you can see on the right side, it's really about how we can control and how we can go direct to consumer so we control our own destiny. Because in stark terms, if you're reliant on business, then you're reliant upon when they give you business. And if they're not ready to give you business, you got to go find it. And so by the very nature of that relationship, you're kind of at their beck and call. We would rather control our own destiny, and we'd rather sail or sink our own ship than be waiting for somebody else to do that for us. And like I said, we've got some things in the lab that we're working on that we think will help propel us towards that happier position. So our challenges, again, it's all about the blocking and tackling. It's sustainment and growth. And what do we do? How do you combine these things? So it's the relationships, again, to keep the people we have. It's the hard work and it's the innovation. Those are things that equal success. And you can take this slide and you can apply it to an auto body shop. You can apply it to a real estate business. You can apply it to about anything. Because when it comes right down to it, I mean, the innovation, the ingenuity is something that is going to be different in any industry, to be sure. But I don't know any company that's succeeded that hasn't done it without these things in place. And here's the last slide. Am I doing okay on time? Where am I? Am I still below 6? Okay. So, it's people. That's why I use stick figures. It's all people. Can we attract, retain, and grow as it relates to our people? That's the obstacle, but it's also the opportunity. And so we're trying very, very hard to mine, if you will, people in this community. They're already living here, they're already going to school here. There's a chance they're invested in this community. And it takes a lot of work to find people in this community that can do the kinds of things we need, but they are here. We've succeeded by having them here, and we want to continue to do that. It's not easy, and it hasn't been easy. We've terminated some people here we haven't wanted to, but it was necessary for our business. So that's our continuing challenge. If we can get people in here that we think show the promise and the ability to do well in the environment, whether they're programmers or animators or videographers or project managers or whatever, or designers, whatever they do, if they can come in with some kind of passion for what we're doing, and if we can retain them and sort of train them, and they're interested in getting better every day at what they do, that's really what I ask of our people. You can't be in the same place this week as you were last week. There's something new you have to have learned, something new you can bring to the table, something new you can contribute so we collectively get better. So we're all about kind of pitching in. We want people who are givers, if you will, not takers. So that's how we've tried to organize our business, is how we've grown a bit. We're a profitable company, and this is kind of the overview about how we see who we are and where we are, and again, it's just connected to the people. So how am I doing? Am I good? Am I go over? Okay. That's the end of my 6 minutes, or however long it took.
Questions?
Take me through, you said you had some offers of Major League Baseball. What were those? And how did you capitalize on them?
Well, the original opportunity with Major League Baseball was we were going to use 3D animation to teach and train coaches so they could deliver that program to kids around the country to help grow the game of baseball. And they loved the product that we did, and it became outdated a couple of years ago, and I've worked every month since then to try to get them to renew, and they finally renewed 9 years later. They finally renewed 6 months ago. And so it is a good cautionary tale that you can't give up if you see that something makes sense and it's work. And it's the same people. The same guy that was there at the beginning is still the same guy who's there now. But there's so much competition out there. I mean, that was one of the dangers of being in Fayetteville, is we can't look across the street and see what somebody in our field has just done that's really amazing or astonishing, and how are we going to catch up to that? We can't do that. And that's one of the things I challenge our team with every day. find out what's going on, figure out what's happening, read trade journals, look at the news, and keep educated. So the idea, of course, was to use that as leverage. Now we've got Major League Baseball. We can use that leverage for anyone and anything. And so based on relationships we had, we were in the NFL offices, and the NBA offices, and the National Hockey League offices, and all the other offices, and we got some moderate traction there. But not all the traction, because they're independent bodies. Some of them want nothing to do with the competitive league. If they did it, we don't want to do it. We don't have the kind of money that you want, all kinds of reasons. But it did give us leverage. We were able to capitalize on it. It did work for us, but it didn't work in the sort of explosive way we thought that it might and could. And in all honesty, looking back, it probably shouldn't have either. But it's pretty easy to fall in love with your first success and think that everybody in the world's going to want it.
How did you find the initial entry point into Major League Baseball? And of course, that can follow into the other sports as well.
Well, I was fortunate early in my career. I was in the college sports business working at the NCAA. There's no Chapel Hill graduates in here. Or at least that your degree is meaningful. I'm actually a big fan of all those folks. But one of my assignments there was I had to coordinate relationships between the NCAA and the professional leagues and organizations. So that was a different leverage point. When I sort of changed careers, I was able to knock on the doors and they answered them. And they said, "What have you got?" And so we were able to have those conversations relatively quickly. That is a huge barrier. I mean, it's all about the people you know, the people you can get to know, the contacts you have, and to treat those people well so they can help you down the road. So that's how I was able to sort of bridge that. And that continues to be. I mean, Don has a real strong background in college sports as well, and knows that business. And so, you know, our first focus in terms of clients is to go to those places that we know, people that we know, businesses that we know, things that we're comfortable with. And as we've expanded, I mean, this is a fairly narrow story in some respects. We've expanded beyond the story that I'm telling now to a lot of other multimedia work, but we still start with the core of where we can have success, where we can hopefully generate profits, and how we can then use a little bit of that profit, a little bit of that leverage to expand into other areas that we think are going to be helpful to us.
Rick, who designed your first program and got this thing started?
Well, we have a team of people who weren't here originally. They were back when the Sport Vision days, when that division broke up. We had those people living in Kansas City, where I had moved from. So we had kind of had this long distance relationship between the developers in Kansas City and me here. And then not very long after that, we started to build one by one here in Fayetteville. And I realized fairly early on that as much as you can work remotely in a technology-driven world, there still, in our view, isn't anything that takes the place of being able to talk face-to-face at least weekly, if not every day. And so it's been a focus of ours since then to work as hard as we can to find people in North Carolina to be in this office, even as opposed to Raleigh, where we've had people working maybe 3 days a week at home and 2 days a week here. It can work, but I really want the people to be here because we're collaborating every single day. The designers are talking to the programmers, we're talking to the animators, we're talking to everybody else. And if you can't sit down face-to-face, read body language, understand what somebody's saying, it makes it harder. You can do it. And some people can do it very, very successfully, but I found that for us, you get collectively smarter if you have those people in the room and talking about, and we're big advocates of, I'll say this gently, kind of beating up ideas. The last thing we want to do, as I talked about earlier, you don't want to fall in love with the first design, the first concept. I mean, you really got to beat it up because, you know, as you all well know, when we release an app into the marketplace, for example, the consumers will beat it up just fine. So you better beat it up on your own as much as you possibly can, because hopefully you're not going to hear anything from the marketplace that you don't already know if you decide to still release something. And that could be an app, an online learning module, a sports-driven learning application, whatever it is. You sure better know what the weaknesses are, if you think there are any, before you release, because you're going to hear about it if you don't.
How many employees you have?
I think as of tomorrow it's 13. We just hired a new entry-level designer who graduated from Methodist, and so We still have one person, our original #1 employee, still back in the Kansas City area, still there. We can't get him to move, but everybody else is here in this office. And now we haven't been able to fill every position with a North Carolina or Fayetteville native. We have somebody who moved from Alabama to be here with us not too long ago. Somebody who we think is moving, long story, moving to us from Texas. We hired somebody from California. The bottom line for our perspective is we will not sacrifice the quality of what we do for the sake of hiring people here. We won't do that. We're gonna, what I say to our team every day is, if our standard isn't great work, I don't want to do it. And if the people here can do great work, I want to hire them. But if I can't find the person here who I think can do great work, then we'll find somebody from somewhere else to come in and do great work. And even that, you can do all of the due diligence you want on somebody and read their resume and look at their portfolio and talk to them and talk to their references. And you still, you can't bat 1,000 on that. You do the best you can. And because our environment is very unforgiving, there's 13 people, and we know almost instantly if somebody's performing or not. It's not like they come in day one and say, okay, here's your task, get this done by the end of the day, because there's orientation, you've got to learn the system and how we do things. But within 30 days, we know, because it's not so much whether they can do the work, but it's who they are, how they communicate, are they honest and trustworthy, do they work hard, do they have a work ethic, are they trying to get better? You can figure that stuff out in 30 days, for sure. And then, and we can still kind of move them along a little bit, but it also becomes pretty obvious. If I've had somebody say, well, gee, if you just got one person not performing, that's pretty good. Well, if that's 1/12 of your workforce, nobody would be satisfied with that.
Do you have any systems or programs to help you organize your relationships or ways to communicate? How do you organize those relationships of value to make sure you're following up, et cetera?
Well, it's a very simple database-oriented process. One of the things that we do is we'll take software programs that come off the shelf, or we'll create something our own that works for us. And it's really, that's something that Dawn hasn't been with us that long, but we'll continue to work on and figure out the best way to do that. A lot of it is objective, and that we think it's wise to have some kind of program set up where you can track that stuff. And then some of it's subjective. Who are the people you're talking to? What's the art process of them? When are you bothering them versus when are they looking forward to hearing from you? And so we do, but we don't get, ultimately it's for now, it's primarily 2 of us, so we don't have a sales force out there that we have to communicate with on a daily basis. It's pretty much what we set up ourselves to do. So I like to keep things as simple as possible unless there's a need to make them complicated. I haven't found a reason to do that yet.
How much of your business, or have you gone into the military
Boy,
area?
we were very fortunate to get a grant 5-6 years ago. We did an interactive 3D learning training program for the Jump Master School, the JMPI inspection. It was very, very well received, but we have not, with the exception of a few other projects of some smaller scale, we really have not been able to penetrate that like we want. We're in the best position geographically to do it, but so much of that is so dependent on knowing the people who participate in the process, the people who buy, if you will. And so we've kicked around hiring a consultant to help us with that. We still very much want to do it, but we want to be wise with the time we spend. Just as an example, we went after something through Fed BizOps once. We went after something through the state process once. In Fed BizOps, what you find out is that if you submit something, you're primarily just helping the government meet its criteria of having more than one bidder, because the opportunity was written by the person who's already going to get the contract. And so on the 1 out of 10 opportunities where that's not the case, we're not going to put our time into that because we don't know which of the 1 out of 10 it is. In the state bidding process, we bid on a bicycle safety program, again, 3-4 years ago. And we put a lot of hours into it. We felt very, very good about it. It was very competitive by right price. We had this great technology to put behind it. What we found out from the state of North Carolina is the only way you find out who wins is if you call the person who's the awarding company, who awarded, and say who won, and you don't get any feedback. Like nobody says, hey, you came in second or third, you were in the finalist pool, your price was a little too much, or we didn't understand that. You don't get any feedback, none. So all you can find out from the state is whether you won or if you didn't win. So there's no opportunity in that process to get better. So our perspective is that for the Fed Biz Ops and the state process, it's no place for a small business to be doing work. Unless you know the person making the grant. If you know the person making the grant, it's probably a really good way to spend time. But we have, until we can get our odds increased in either of those processes through ways that I'm talking about, we don't plan to participate because it's just a waste of time for us. And primarily organically grown 12-person company. You know, Brian was up here last month talking about, you know, K3, and he talked about spending, I think he said $60,000 or $70,000 on completing an RFP. He knows the process, he knows the people, his business has a different scope and scale and approach than we do. That makes perfect sense for him. It doesn't make any sense for us. So we're not above, I think our very nature is we're risk takers. We just want to be responsible risk takers. We don't want to frivolously throw money at things. We want to make sure if we throw money at something, we've got at least a fighting chance to get it.
Do you use any of the social media to communicate with either businesses or your consumer base in spreading the word on this?
We do. It depends. Now, if we're talking about our business-to-business partners, we don't really need to because they've got all that in-house and they're handling that and they're managing that. The things that we do on our own, whether we are releasing an app or whether we're whatever it is, creating something. We're about ready to release a new product in a couple of weeks for which we're going to use social media. And it just depends upon the nature of it. But that's part of, one of the things I wanted to do when we grew our staff a little bit is to make sure we had strength in at least every area in-house. So we have people who can program, who can animate, who can design, who know social media, who know these things. And so we typically only bring in a contractor who's got some really complicated high-level programming to do, where you wouldn't want to keep somebody every day on your team for a salary of $100,000 when you're going to need them for 3 months. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And the same thing, like if we need to dig really deep into a particular area, we might have a contractor over here that we'll bring in, or we might have you know, part-time employee we want to bring in. We try to keep our staff at a point where we can handle everything at least to some moderate degree with the people we have. And that person's going to be knowledgeable about the project, and that person will know, I need help over here, let's bring somebody in. And we also got people in our company that are trained in multiple ways. So we've got one of our project managers who's really good at programming. He loves to program. So depending on how our focus shifts from week to week, we can move him over here or over there. And we've got another woman who's very good with videography and also a very good project manager. We can move her over here or over there. So I'd rather keep our money in our company with our people and continue to invest in what we have here. Because whenever we hire a contractor, especially if they're not in our community, then we're taking our money and giving it to somebody else. I'd rather keep it here in Fayetteville. When we do that, sometimes what I do to our employees is I'll say, we can go hire a contractor to come in for a month and help you out at this thing for 10 hours a week. Or if you want, I'll give you a bonus in the amount of XYZ at the end of the month if you want to do it all yourself. Don't burn yourself out. Don't create a situation like that. You decide. Do you want somebody else to come in and help? Do you want the money yourself? You want to make a couple more bucks?
I'm a little fuzzy on the end product. Is it mostly apps that teach just the basic skills of how to throw a baseball? Do you get into baseball strategy? Is it like a weve?
Yeah, well, and fair question. I mean, that's really why the focus today was purposely general and people related. If I had to synthesize our business into maybe a sentence or two, it would be interactive applications that teach, train, or entertain. And that can be, we use two primary development tools. We use 3D animation and Ultra HD video. Those are the tools that create what we do. And then this probably leads to the fuzziness because it is fuzzy. Then it's what we do with those two creations. And we have a support around, a net, if you will, around both of those creation tools. So we can create apps out of that. We can create online learning courses out of that. We can create gaming applications out of that. We can go into, we use something called the Unity Gaming Engine to create applications out of it if you want to be interactive. So it's really about creating content with these two primary tools, and then deciding what you want to do with it, how you want to distribute it, what vehicle you want to use. And of course, everything, we think about this first now, you know, your smartphone, the consumer consumption habits of all of us are increasing as we use this for all kinds of purposes, and tablets as well. So most people are consuming media in a way they never did before, and you can look at the statistics, but newspaper, magazine readership is down. People want to look at short form video, and they want to share it, and they want to comment on it. And I mean, that's way too simple, but it's how people have changed their viewing habits, and so we've got to keep up with the times.
Rick, I'll ask the last question. What can the community do for you?
So it really, what the community can do really would be, and maybe someone here wouldn't have an impact on this, but it's really, I think, about how we can access talent in this community. If it's coming from Methodist, Fayetteville State, FTCC, the high schools, whatever it is, we find, it's ironic, as a small company, we need people who know how to do something. Let's take programming, computer programming. They need to know how to computer program. But because there aren't really, this is not just for us, but for any company here, there aren't big corporations in Fayetteville. So the chance of having a degree in computer programming and going someplace and doing one thing, the same thing, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, probably doesn't happen here very often. So what we need are people who know how to do a skill, perform a skill, and who can also think independently. Because if you do one without the other, the value that you have diminishes. As a community that has a lot of small businesses, I think that's a critically important skill or set of skills to acquire, to be able to think independently, to reason, to use judgment, but to know how to do your craft. I think that's the important thing. So in terms of programs that are being created or built, I mean, I remember several years ago I came over here to present on our 3D animation to a classroom of animators, and one asked about how we hired, and I said, well, we want people who can animate and people who can think critically about their work, communicate their work. And this person was a little bit blown away because he said, well, all I want to do is go create environments for a gaming company. And I said, that doesn't exist in Fayetteville. If you want to be in Fayetteville, you've got to be able to do the things. You got to be able to contribute to the business. You got to be able to say, I think that's a bad idea. I think that's a good idea. I want to change this and make it look like that. Why are we doing this? They need to ask those questions because, especially as it relates to technical skills, there are going to be people in our company who don't know a whole lot, me included, about how that process works. So you need people who are really engaged in sort of the subjective piece of your business, the judgment piece of your business, to say whether something's a good idea or a bad idea and why it is or why it isn't. Because if you're just up the road in Raleigh and you're working at SAS, you might very well be doing the same thing every day and nobody ever asks your opinion of whether what you're doing, or Microsoft, or wherever it is, IBM, I'm here to program every day, I do what they tell me to do. That doesn't work for us, it won't work for us. People who think that way, for us, don't work with us anymore. They just don't.
It's related to what he's talking about. So what, from your perspective, Rick, what's the biggest skills gap we have in the local area?
I would say it is that judgment piece. It's that more well-rounded education to think creatively. And I don't know, again, how a lot of things are talking about real-life examples. If you go through, say, a course on 3D animation, it would be great that somebody knows how to do it, but it would be really nice as part of the course to present 10 scenarios. How do you solve this problem in a real-world example? You've got a character that's not properly rigged, and you're being asked to complete this task in so many days. What do you do? I mean, there's all kinds of things like that. It's not the skill abilities to problem solving that I see as the biggest issue, the judgment piece. How do you creatively solve problems? Or at least what I say to our team is, if you've got a problem, you have to identify it right away and come tell me, but you also have to have the first idea for how to solve it. Because if you come to me, and I'm not the most technology savvy guy in our company, and say, well, what do you want me to do? I'm going to turn around and say, what do you think you should do? And once we've identified the problem and not hidden it, which happens from time to time, then you can sit down with a group of people and say, great, no problem, that's going to happen. The work that we do, by its very nature, involves some kind of mistakes, errors. It's complicated, difficult work. You can't get it right the first time, so you have to feel comfortable saying, I don't get it, this doesn't look right, I don't like what we're doing. You have to be able to say that so we can get together and solve the problem.